Fabulous. So the subject is how to be heard in a sea of noise. Probably one of the most frustrating things is if you're talking and nothing is landing and you're not getting the response you want. You can get to the point where you think, what's the point? But you know that you really need help, or you really need to do things differently. And this can include talking and listening to yourself. This might be talking to your partner, it could be your clients, it could be your colleagues, it could even be on social media. If you're putting posts out and nobody's commenting on them, or you're sending an email and nobody's answering, can you relate to how that feels, how frustrating it is? Do you remember a time, or is it just me? Can I just give us, yeah? And if it's not you, maybe it's somebody you're coaching, supporting, mentoring, or helping out who's getting frustrated because they can't get themselves heard and understood. When you're at the real end of it and you've tried everything you possibly can, it can feel quite isolating and lonely. And often all that is needed is somebody who can listen to help you get clarity of what you want and the confidence to make that happen. And I want to talk to you today about three reasons why you might not get heard and understood, to give you some insight on things you could do differently, or you could do to resource or support somebody else. So the number one reason we don't get heard and understood is because we don't actually know the purpose for talking. We start chatting and we don't actually know the outcome that we want. We don't know what kind of listening we need. We don't know what we need our listener to do. And most people go through life not realizing there's about 8 different kinds of listening. And we start talking, and it's only when we get the feedback, i.e. the response from our listener, that we go, oh, you just don't listen. You're not paying attention. I'm sure you've done it to your partners before now, or even your kids, or those people around you. It's often until you get the response that you realize that you actually needed something from your listener. So one of the things that my husband is really, really good at doing, he's really good at doing the downline kind of download listening. So that's when I come out and I'm frustrated and things aren't going very well, and I'm just talking about everything and I'm really excited. Oh, something's gone really well, and I'm talking very fast and I've got loads of things going on. And he just sits there and goes, doesn't say anything. It's great. However, sometimes I've got loads going on and I need some help and I want things to do around the house, and I start talking without recognizing or telling him, now I need him to actually listen to what I'm saying, because there's a to-do list in amongst this lot and I'd like him to do something at the end of this conversation. But he just often goes, and then I get frustrated because it feels like he's not listening. But the thing is, it sounds quite similar to the other kind of thing I do, where I'm chatting just to vent, just to get it off my chest, just to get through the frustration or the angst of something not going well, or just the sheer excitement that something's gone brilliantly. So one of the things is, think about your purpose for talking. Think about, what's the outcome you want for yourself? And one of the best things I know most of my clients take on board is if they start with saying, I'm just venting, I don't need a solution, I don't need any suggestions, I don't need anything, I just need you to listen. And then be kind, because when they do just listen and you discover that's not the listening you wanted some questions, you wanted some nods, or you want to whatever, it's a process of learning between the two of you. So what do you want as the outcome from talking? What do you want for the other person? And what do you want for the relationship? And the most common problem we have is that most of us as humans, we don't say what we mean, and we don't mean what we say. So if I say to somebody, what would you like to have happen? In all the years that I've coached, they might say, I want to be more assertive, or I want to be more confident, or I want to be more productive, or whatever that might be. When I ask a question like what kind of assertive, or what kind of productive, or what kind of confident, they often don't know what they mean by what they say until they start inquiring and getting curious. So be aware that when you talk, if you don't know what you mean by what you say, you're asking a lot of your listener. So, and sometimes the bind we get in is we need to be listened to get the clarity of what we mean by what we say. So think about what you're saying. What do you mean? Lots of people tend to talk about what they don't want rather than what they do want. So if you imagine going up to partner, clients, whatever, and you talk about everything that's not working, their brain, or our brains, at a very basic level, a pattern spotting mechanism. So they're looking for things that repeat, and it has one sole purpose: to keep you safe. So if they hear someone talking about a problem, the natural thing for the brain to do is start to try and think how they can solve the problem. If you don't tell them there isn't a problem to solve, and you don't tell them what you actually want or need, they're going to go into problem solving mechanism, and they're going to start making suggestions. And have you thought about this? And have you done that? So often you don't have clarity of what you want from the conversation. They don't know what kind of listening they need to do. Does that make sense? And then if you think about listening in terms of, some people think listening, if I said to you clarity of what listening is, some people think listening is just being quiet. But it turns out actually that other people's model of listening is that they might nod at the right point. They might say yes at the right point. They might ask a question. They might feed back information that makes them feel like they've heard something they've said. And it only takes somebody paraphrasing or adding a bit of their own stuff in, and somebody can instantly feel not heard. So one of the things I work with is a process called clean language, developed by a man called David Grove in the 1980s, where we actually ask a question and we repeat the other person's words back exactly, so they get to hear themselves think. So the first thing is to remember the purpose for talking, and to make sure that you say what you mean and mean what you say. If you talk about what you don't want, it's a bit like the metaphor I think is like going to imagine going to Asda's to somebody that and giving them a list saying, I don't want bread, I don't want eggs, and I don't want milk. They've now got an aisle of things. They want to go shopping. They really want to help you. But even your own brain can't help you. Your own system can't help you. So if you do nothing else, know why you're talking and focus on what you want rather than what you don't want. And sometimes I have to talk about what I don't want and what's not working before I can get to what I want, in which case I can just tell my listener, I'm just venting what's not working. You don't need to solve the problem. And my husband now knows if I start venting and I go on too much or I repeat it several times, that he should ask me one of two questions. What would you like to have happen, darling? Because that will make me focus on what I want. Or what is working? So I could focus on what's going well rather than what's not going well. So that's thinking about the purpose. The second thing is timing. She says, checking her watch and realizing it's now 7 minutes in. Often the reason we don't get heard is that we haven't checked with the listener if they have time to listen. We start talking without realizing what is already going on in their head. I see listening a bit like if you've spent a whole day of listening to loads and loads of other people, and then somebody else wants you to listen, but you're full, it's hard to take on anything else. So often we start talking to somebody without recognizing what their state is. Maybe they've just had a really bad email from a friend. It could be a bereavement. They could have lost a contract with a client. We don't know what's going on in their world, and we haven't checked before we start talking if this is a good time to talk. We haven't checked that they're resourced, and we often rely on our closest people around us and assume they should always be resourced, but they're not always. It's not always a good time. Maybe they just need to be able to transition from work before you start talking. Maybe they need to transition from having the kids asking for 101 things to do before they can take on any more of your information and actually listen to you. So think about timing in terms of, is it a good time for the other person? The other thing is, technically, when we start talking, it takes the brain a little while. If I'm in my own little bubble thinking about stuff and you suddenly ask me a question or start talking to me, it will take my brain a little while to tune into your voice. And often the really important bit of what I needed to hear was right at the beginning. And I'm now listening, but I didn't hear that first bit because my brain hasn't actually tuned into you. So it's actually that stopping and saying, have you got time, gives that person time to actually sort of stop thinking about whatever they were thinking about, stop their brain going wherever it was going, and actually be ready to listen to you. And often people don't have that pause between, is it a good time, and actually starting talking. So give people the time to actually change their focus in order to be able to give you your attention. And the last thing is, and the most common thing is, people say, have you got 2 minutes? Or you've got 5 minutes to chat. And the person knows, because they know you well, they spoke to you before, they know that you're one of those people. I'm one of those people. That 5 minutes isn't 5 minutes. If you need to chat, you might need to vent for a little while. So be aware that if you're saying to somebody you're going to have 5 minutes, or that you keep it to 5 minutes, even if you put an alarm on, as I'm doing now, and it's 10, and you stop when you said you're going to talk. Because I committed to 10 minutes. You've promised to listen to me for 10 minutes. If I start going over that, there's a part of your brain that goes, when's she going to stop? She's going to stop at 10 minutes. Where is she going? And there's a part of the brain it's the pattern spotting part that's going, she's breaking the rules. It's not meant to be more than 10 minutes. Why is she still talking? So you're no longer listening to me. because I said it was going to be this long and I'm going to go over. So I'm going to check with you now that we've reached the 10-minute point, and I've got one other point to mention. Are you happy for me to carry on for another 2 or 3 minutes?
Yes.
Just give me a thumbs up if that's okay. But there's a really good example there and then of what happens if you change the rules. And we so often with human beings, we generalize and quantify, and we use language around time and we don't mean it. Have you just got a minute? Have you got 5 minutes? But actually it probably needs an hour. However, one of the things that I learned with my daughter, she said to me, I've been doing this work now for 30 odd years, but she was a teenager, so we're talking about 10 years ago now. She said, oh, you only ever listen when you're paid. And I was like, I think I'm a better listener when I'm paid. Why is that? And I said, do you know what it is? I said, you come in from school and you start and you don't stop for 3 hours. And I'm really happy to listen to you, but my clients only expect me to listen to them for 90 minutes and I get a break. So can we put the clock on, and after 90 minutes, can I have a wee break? Because if I used to try and pull away from her, she goes, see, you're not interested, you don't like what I'm saying, you're bored, blah, blah. But I was actually just technically needed a break from listening. It was often a load of venting. She didn't need me to solve anything. She didn't want me to say anything. She just wanted me to sit there doing that. But it takes quite a lot of concentration to listen to somebody for a long period of time if you really want them to pay attention. So be respectful of the fact, the energy it takes to really listen to somebody. And if you say it's going to be X amount of time, then stop at that point and check. Because sometimes just stopping and not talking for a moment just allows their system to go, okay, no more information coming my way. I can just rebalance and I can process a bit more information coming through. So if you're going to set a time, keep to it, honor it, stop and check in with them. And if they say, no, I haven't got any more time, be okay with that. Got that as a tag team, one child, next child, then wife. Yeah, tell me about it. I have some clients who've sat in the car and read their book before they've gone into the house to give them some transition from work to home. And it's been a massive thing during COVID where people are all in the same space. I've really struggled with both my husband and son being at home all the time because they're used to me being the listener. The minute I stop with a client, they stop hearing me talking. They go, Mom, I'm like, and I have to put signs out now, recording for 3 hours, do not come in, because so I can have some breaks between the conversations, because the minute they hear I'm available, they come and talk, and I wasn't getting breaks between listening. So it's something to be aware of. And the last thing, and I'm just aware of time now, we're 13, is the feedback. So if you're talking to somebody, often what happens is we're not confident or capable or willing for them to ask us questions to clarify what we mean by what we say, and we don't ask them for feedback. And so if you're going to just transmit, there's a good chance people won't make sense of what you've got to say. You have to be able to ask them for feedback, and you have to be able to listen to it without being defensive and criticizing, and just accept that that is their perception. That's how they've heard it. That's how they've understood it. Otherwise, it's difficult for people to listen if all you're ever going to do is criticize their ability to listen. And often what we do is we criticize that you don't listen, but actually it might be that they're absolutely listening, but what you want them to do, they're not interested in doing. They don't want to do the dishes. They don't want to clear up after you. They don't want to help with whatever it is you're asking for. It might be that you talk really fast and they can't cognitively process everything you're saying. And they might be listening and actually just not interested in a word you've got to say. And that's okay. Not everybody is skilled and not everybody is resourced. And therefore, my thing is make sure you develop a network of people like these business networking groups where it is okay to come and talk about what you want to talk to. And don't put the pressure on one person in your life, which is usually your significant other half or a friend or a sister, where they get everything all of the time. Give them a break and spread it out around different people if you need to be heard and understood. So I will leave it at that, and I will ask you for some feedback. What do you know now? And what difference does knowing that make? So I'd love to know what you've got from today's talk.